for this next bit, we're just going to take a second setting up the camera. And really, this is going to be a bit of an editing as well. So I've already created the camera, and I'm going to search it up, gray box camera from the World Outliner. And now what I'm going to do also while I have it selected is I'm going to enter it. I'm going to enter the camera. And you'll notice it has put these black bars on the side, and that's because the camera is locked to a specific aspect ratio. And you'll see in the camera's details panel, currently it is set to a 16:9 digital film ratio, which is good for computer screens because computer screens are 16:9. I do think it's also pretty interesting though to play with alternative aspect ratios. Personally, I like wide shots quite a lot, and so I think I'll widen mine a bit, and I will shorten it a bit as well. Let's do 30:12. It's totally arbitrary right now, but I think it'll be a nice setup. I'm also going to use this time to zero out this rotation here. I saw it was a -3 degrees, so if I zero it, it'll be closer to a near orthogonal. It'll be more like a 1-point perspective. The other important thing that I'm going to manipulate in this are going to be the focus settings and the focal length and aperture. I'm going to go ahead and immediately use the focal length change here. I'm going to zoom it in a bit, right? So all I did is I increased the focal length, which has brought the camera closer in to the scene. You'll notice now though that it's a bit blurry, which is kind of nice actually. It's focusing though in the background, but what I want to do is I want to focus on the table. So if I keep, I'm pulling out these little triangles for the hidden options, and I'm going to the focus settings. In the focus settings, you can sample the screen depth by using the picker or by sliding this bar. I'm going to start by using the picker on the sphere, and so now the scene is focused specifically on the foreground here, which is pretty nice. You'll see exactly what happens as I slide this bar. If I slide it farther away, the table becomes out of focus and it starts to focus on the background. So in this case, where it had it on the sphere, that seems pretty nice. And the other thing that's useful here is the aperture. So the lower the aperture, the less will be in focus. So if I lower this down, you'll notice that the sphere is still in focus, but now the cubes and the cylinders and other aspects on the table are out of focus. If I bring this way, way up, everything will be in focus. So you can play around with this quite a bit, and even just with these really basic geometries, generate some gorgeous setups, right? And I encourage you to play around with the lighting. Have a good time with it. Set it up so that it's compositionally beautiful, and it will make the rest of this process so much easier. I'm vibing on this camera. I dig it. I think this is a solid setup. Compositionally, I've got this background element that's out of focus, taking up this portion. This is not quite centered, but this is going to be the focus. It's close to a third, which if we want to see the third, what you can do is you can swap to a cinematic viewport, jump back into your camera, and then here we can show the 3x3 grid. And you can use this to set up the composition really quickly and easily. And what I might do in this setup is I'll jump out of the camera, scroll mouse wheel down to slow down my camera as well. Oh, that's like intersecting there. I'm going to select all of these. I'm selecting this cylinder last. I'm jumping back into my camera, and I'm just going to rotate and move it so that the sphere is perfectly in this third. And perhaps similarly over here, what I'll do is I'll move so that this kind of center of mass of this area is at this third. And so now I have this camera set up. I'm going to get out of the thirds breakdown here, and I'm going to go ahead and lock this camera. if I don't, I'm prone to moving the camera, and that'll be really frustrating later. So I'm just going to find the camera on the list. I'm going to right click it in the world outliner and say transform, lock actor movement. And now I can't accidentally fly the camera around or something, which is kind of frustrating after you spent so much time setting them up. Okay, if I press the G key in the scene, it'll hide and show these different elements. So you need to make sure before you screenshot that you are hiding these elements, right? And the other way to do that is to make sure that game view is checked from the viewport pull down menu. But I am noticing before I do that this light, this kind of banding came back a bit when I changed my setup, and so I'm just gonna adjust that. I'm just gonna slide the bar to kind of reset some of that. Maybe I'll up the shadow scale resolution. Or actually, I'll lower it, and it looks like it's kind of blurred it out nicely. But if I up it, I'm gonna leave it upped, and I'll sharpen it. I'll try a contact shadow again. No, I'm not crazy about the contact shadow. But you'll see what I'm just like trying these different aspects. These kind of lighting details are going to be different, really based off of your setup and the type of light and all sorts of things, right? So my advice is to just try stuff, because you never really know how lighting's going to interact or bounce off of stuff until you just do it, until you get really good at it and like are well practiced at setting up lighting. It's just an art in and of itself, really. So once you have your scene set up, and we'll say this is what we want out of our scene, I'm going to go to game view, and for part A, this is all you'll have to do, right, is set up your lighting and do a high resolution screenshot. And so this is how you render in Unreal. You go to high resolution screenshot, and if I click this take screenshot button, it will export an image that is exactly this pixel count on my screen. But what you can do is you can up this resolution. For the purposes of this exercise, stay at 2 or lower. Okay, and before you do this, please save. I'm actually going to hit save current right now, because especially if you're going to crank up this number, if you raise this number to like 8 or something, you can easily crash the software. And it even gives you this warning here. It says, due to the high system requirements of a high resolution screenshot, very large multipliers might cause the graphics card driver to become unresponsive and possibly crash. In these cases, please use a lower multiplier. So I honestly, for almost everything I do, I stick at 2. And for the purposes of this part A exercise, this is all you need to do, is hit this button. And now you'll see in the bottom right, it has saved that screenshot to a location on your computer. And if I just go to that and double click it, boom, there is my image. There is my render. And that's all you need to submit for part A. So spend some time, set up your scene, set up your lighting, and screenshot it out. Now that we have that out of the way, though, I'm going to go into how to push the work farther for part B by adding in objects and materials.